happened last winter, during one of the coldest nights of the year. My parents had gone out to a holiday party, leaving me alone in the house. I was 16 at the time, and more than happy to have the house to myself for a few hours. I had snacks, a stack of movies, and my phone to keep me occupied. What could go wrong? By the time the clock hit 8 p.m., it had started snowing heavily. Thick flakes swirled past the windows, and the street outside was blanketed in white. The soft glow of the streetlights gave everything an eerie, quiet feel. I loved it at first. It felt peaceful. I was sitting on the couch, halfway through a movie, when there was a knock at the door. It was a strange, deliberate knock. 3 slow, heavy taps. I paused the movie and glanced at my phone. My parents hadn't mentioned anyone coming over. I figured it was probably a delivery driver or maybe a neighbor needing something. I got up and walked to the door, hesitating for a second before peeking through the peephole. There was a man standing on the porch. He wasn't wearing a jacket, just a thin sweatshirt, despite the freezing temperature. His head was down, so I couldn't see his face clearly. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets. Can I help you?" I called through the door. The man didn't answer. He just stood there, unmoving. A chill ran down my spine. Something about him felt off. "Who is it?" I asked again, trying to sound braver than I felt. He slowly lifted his head, and I finally got a glimpse of his face. His eyes were wide, unblinking, and his lips curled into a strange, almost mechanical smile. "Let me in," he said, his voice calm and steady. I instinctively stepped back from the door. "No, sorry, I can't do that." The smile faded from his face. His expression turned cold, almost angry. He leaned closer to the door, his breath fogging the glass of the small window. "Please," he said softly. "It's cold out here." I didn't answer. My heart was pounding in my chest. Something told me not to open that door, no matter what. For a few seconds, we stood there in silence. Then, without warning, he tried the door handle. It rattled violently, but thankfully, it was locked. I bolted back to the living room, grabbing my phone to call my parents, but the call went straight to voicemail. I tried again, same result. I debated calling the police, but I wasn't sure what to say. "There's a creepy guy at my door" didn't feel like a strong enough reason. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he was just a confused neighbor. Then I heard footsteps crunching in the snow, moving around the side of the house. I rushed to the back window and peeked through the curtain. The man was standing in the backyard now, staring directly at the house. He didn't move. He just stood there, watching. My hands were shaking as I locked the back door. I double-checked every window and door in the house, making sure everything was secure. The man stayed in the yard, not moving, not looking away. I finally decided to call the police. This time, I wasn't taking any chances. 911, what's your emergency?" the dispatcher answered. "There's a man outside my house," I whispered. "He's been knocking on my door and now he's in my backyard. He won't leave." "Stay on the line," she said. "Officers are on their way. Is he trying to get inside?" "Not yet," I said, keeping an eye on him through the curtain. Minutes felt like hours as I waited for the police. The man didn't move. He just stood there, staring at the house with that same vacant expression. Finally, flashing red and blue lights lit up the front yard. I heard car doors slam, followed by voices shouting commands. I ran to the front door and opened it just enough to see 2 officers walking toward the backyard with their flashlights drawn. "He's back there," I told them, pointing toward the rear of the house. But when they reached the yard, the man was gone. The officers searched the area, but there was no sign of him, just a set of footprints leading into the woods behind my house. "Do you recognize him?" one of the officers asked me. I shook my head. "I've never seen him before." The officer nodded, making a few notes in his notebook. "We'll patrol the area for the rest of the night. Keep your doors locked, and if he comes back, call us immediately." I thanked them and locked the door after they left. For the rest of the night, I stayed in the living room with all the lights on, jumping at every sound. My parents got home around midnight. I told them everything, and they were understandably freaked out. We didn't sleep much that night. The police never found the man. For weeks after that, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I stepped outside, I'd glance toward the woods, half expecting to see him standing there again. I don't know what he wanted or why he chose my house that night, but one thing is for sure. I'll never forget the way he smiled at me through the window, as if he already knew how the night would end. It was a Friday night, and my parents were away for a weekend trip, leaving me home alone for the first time. I was 17, old enough to manage, and honestly, I was excited for a little freedom. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt peaceful during the day but unsettling once the sun went down. By 10 p.m., I was curled up on the couch watching a movie, the hum of the TV filling the room. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows, a typical cold autumn night. Around 10:30, just as the movie's suspenseful music began to build, I heard something. Faint at first, but distinct. It sounded like a voice. I paused the movie and listened. Nothing. I shrugged it off. It was probably the wind or maybe the neighbors outside. I started the movie again and settled back in. Then I heard it again. A low, hushed voice. I muted the TV, my heart thudding in my chest. The sound seemed to be coming from upstairs. I stared at the ceiling, listening carefully. This time, it was unmistakable. Someone was speaking. I couldn't make out the words, but it was a steady murmur as if someone were having a conversation. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had left a window open and the wind was playing tricks on me. Or perhaps it was a radio left on upstairs. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Grabbing my phone, I slowly made my way to the base of the stairs. "Hello?" I called, trying to sound braver than I felt. No response. The voice had stopped. My gut told me not to go upstairs, but curiosity got the better of me. I climbed the stairs, each step creaking beneath my feet. My house wasn't old, but at that moment, every sound felt amplified. The hallway at the top of the stairs was dark, except for the faint glow of my bedroom light, which I had left on earlier. I stood there, scanning the space, my breath caught in my throat. Then I heard it again, a whisper, soft and deliberate. It was coming from my room. I froze. Every instinct told me to run, but I couldn't leave without knowing what was going on. Slowly, I approached the door, my phone clutched tightly in my hand. The voice stopped the moment I stepped into the room. I flicked on the light and looked around. Nothing. My bed was made, my desk untouched. The window was shut, locked from the inside. I let out a shaky breath, trying to convince myself I had imagined it. I was just tired, right? Then my phone buzzed in my hand, making me jump. I glanced at the screen, a text from my mom. "Did you just call me?" My blood ran cold. I hadn't called her. My fingers shook as I typed back, "Number Y?" A few seconds later, my phone buzzed again. "I got a call from your number. All I heard was breathing and some whispering. Is everything okay?" I stared at the message, my heart pounding. There was no way I could have called her by accident. My phone had been with me the entire time. Suddenly, I heard it again, this time much closer. A whisper just outside the door. I didn't think. I sprinted down the stairs, grabbed my keys, and bolted out of the house, slamming the door behind me. I sat in my car, locking the doors, trying to catch my breath. My fingers fumbled as I called my mom, explaining everything in a rush. She told me to stay put while she called the police. The officers arrived within minutes. 2 patrol cars pulled into the driveway, their lights flashing. I watched as they entered the house, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. I sat there, clutching the steering wheel, waiting. After what felt like an eternity, one of the officers emerged from the house. "There's no one inside," he said, but his tone didn't offer much comfort. "We checked every room, every closet. Nothing's out of place." "Did you hear anything?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The officer shook his head. "No, but if you feel unsafe, you should stay somewhere else tonight. We'll patrol the neighborhood just in case." I nodded, thanking him before driving straight to my best friend's house. I didn't sleep that night or the next. My parents came home the following day. We changed all the locks and installed a security system, but the strange events didn't stop haunting me. I never figured out where the voice came from or who it belonged to. But every time I'm home alone, I swear I still feel it. The faintest whisper, just out of reach. It was a quiet Friday night in January, and I was home alone for the weekend. My parents had gone out of town for a family wedding, and since I had a project to finish for school, I opted to stay behind. At first, I enjoyed the solitude, watching TV, eating snacks, and enjoying the rare freedom of having the house to myself. By 11 p.m., the house had fallen into an eerie stillness. Outside, the wind whistled, and snowflakes swirled under the porch light. I was wrapped in a blanket on the living room couch, half watching a movie when I heard it. 3 slow knocks at the front door. It wasn't frantic or hurried, just 3 deliberate knocks. My body tensed. I wasn't expecting anyone, and at this hour, it didn't seem likely someone would randomly drop by. My first instinct was to ignore it. Whoever it was would realize it was late and leave. But a few seconds later, there it was again. Knock, knock, knock. I muted the TV and sat perfectly still, listening. The knocks stopped, replaced by silence. I told myself it was probably a neighbor, maybe someone needing help. But then again, why wouldn't they just ring the doorbell? I got up and moved toward the door, careful to keep my footsteps light. Peeking through the peephole, I expected to see a neighbor bundled in a coat or maybe a delivery driver who had the wrong house. Instead, there was no one there. I stared into the darkness for a few seconds, confused, my breath fogging up the glass. The porch light cast a dim glow over the snow-covered front steps, and there were no footprints, nothing at all. I told myself it must have been the wind, just something hitting the door, but as I turned to walk away, I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. This time it came from the back door. My heart dropped into my stomach. No one ever used the back door. It opened into the yard, which backed up to a wooded area. The only way someone could get back there was by walking through the deep snow, yet there hadn't been any footprints out front. Grabbing my phone, I called out, "Hello? Who's there?" No answer. I crept toward the kitchen, where the back door was. The glass panes on the door were covered by thin curtains, but I could see a shadow, tall and unmoving, just outside the door. My hands shook as I tried to think logically. Maybe it was someone lost or in trouble. I couldn't just leave them out there in the cold, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. "Can I help you?" I called through the door, trying to keep my voice steady. A few seconds of silence passed. Then a man's voice responded, muffled through the door.
"I think I'm lost. Can you let me in?"
I froze. His tone was calm, too calm, like he wasn't worried at all. And something about his voice sent chills down my spine. "I can call someone for you," I said, backing away from the door.
"No need.
He said, his voice dropping lower.
Just let me in."
I turned and ran, locking myself in the bathroom down the hall. My hands trembled as I dialed 911, whispering to the operator that someone was at my house trying to get inside. The operator assured me officers were on their way. She stayed on the line, asking me questions to keep me calm. A few minutes later, I heard the familiar wail of sirens outside. I didn't dare move until the operator told me the police were there. When I opened the door, two officers were standing in my living room. They searched the house and the yard, but found no one. The snow in the backyard was undisturbed. No footprints, nothing. "Are you sure you saw someone?" one of the officers asked gently. "Yes," I insisted, my voice trembling. "He knocked on both doors. He spoke to me." The officers exchanged a glance. One of them pulled me aside. "We've had a few reports like this in the past few weeks. Someone knocks, tries to lure people to the door, but no one's ever actually seen him leave tracks in the snow." A chill ran down my spine. The officers stayed for a while, patrolling the area, but eventually they had to leave. They promised to check in throughout the night. I double-checked every lock in the house before crawling into bed, my heart still racing. Sleep didn't come easily, and every creak of the house made me jump. But the man never came back. I don't know who or what he was, but I've never been home alone since without keeping every door locked, every curtain drawn, and my phone close by, just in case. It started on a rainy Saturday night in October. My parents were out of town for the weekend, leaving me alone in the house. Normally, I didn't mind being home by myself. I actually liked the peace and quiet. But that night, something felt off. The rain was coming down hard, tapping against the windows as I curled up on the couch to watch TV. Our house is an older one, with creaky floors and a basement that always gave me the creeps. My parents liked to joke that it was haunted, but I never really believed in that sort of thing. At around 10:30 p.m., I heard a noise, a faint creak coming from somewhere in the house. I muted the TV and listened. The sound didn't come again, so I shrugged it off, telling myself it was just the house settling. But then, about 20 minutes later, it happened again. This time, it was louder. I got up and walked toward the kitchen, trying to figure out where the noise was coming from. I stood still, listening intently. It sounded like footsteps, coming from the basement. I froze. No one should have been down there. We rarely used the basement except for storage, and the only way in was through the locked door in the hallway or the bulkhead doors outside. My heart started to race. I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe something had fallen over. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and walked to the basement door. The door was closed, but not locked like it usually was. I hesitated for a second before slowly opening it. The smell of damp concrete hit me as I peered down the dark staircase. "Hello?" I called, my voice shaky. No response. I flicked on the flashlight and started down the stairs, one step at a time, my heart pounding harder with each creak of the wood beneath my feet. The basement was cold, the air heavy with moisture. The light from my flashlight swept across old boxes and furniture covered in sheets. Everything looked undisturbed. But then I noticed something odd. A set of muddy footprints leading from the bottom of the stairs toward the back corner of the basement where an old storage closet stood. I swallowed hard, gripping the flashlight tighter. "If someone's down here, you need to leave. I'm calling the police." Still, there was no answer. I backed up toward the stairs, ready to bolt, when I heard it, a faint shuffling sound from inside the closet. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't wait to investigate further. I turned and sprinted up the stairs, slamming the door behind me and locking it. My hands were shaking as I called 911, trying to explain what had just happened. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me until the police arrived. Within minutes, 2 officers were at my door. I told them about the noises and the footprints, and they immediately went down to search the basement. I stood in the hallway, listening to their footsteps thudding on the basement floor. For a few minutes there was silence, and then one of the officers called up to me. You said you saw footprints, right? Yes, I said. Well, the officer said, his voice cautious, we found the footprints, but they only go one way. There's no sign of anyone else down here. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? I asked. The footprints lead from the bottom of the stairs to the closet, he said, but there aren't any leading back out. I felt a chill run down my spine. The officers continued their search, but they didn't find anyone in the closet or anywhere else in the basement. It's possible someone got in and managed to slip out through the bulkhead doors, one of the officers suggested, though even he didn't seem convinced. After checking the rest of the house and making sure everything was locked, they assured me they'd patrol the area for the rest of the night. I tried to sleep after they left, but every little noise made me jump. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still in the house, watching me. The next morning, I went back down to the basement in the daylight, hoping it would feel less terrifying. But as I stood there, staring at the single trail of footprints leading into the closet, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't imagining it. Someone had been in my house that night, and whoever it was, they never left through the front door.